I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Slightly bold statement. Financial success starts not with spreadsheets, but with human behavior. Kind of makes sense. Let's consider this. In my episode today on Leadovation, I sit down with a guy named Hugh Massie. He's the founder of DNA Behavior to unpack how the hardwired behaviors of leaders drive and sometimes even derail business outcomes. Most organizations reverse engineer their strategy by reacting to financial statements, which are lagging indicators that only show what's already happened. But what if we were to flip the script and use behavior as a leading indicator of financial health? Hugh explains how leadership behaviors can be measured, predicted, even digitized, offering insights into decision-making, culture impact, and long-term success. My conversation with him also explores how self-awareness and context shapes leadership, how boards and teams enable or even contain powerful leaders, and how companies must adapt to risk extension in a world disrupted by AI and economic change. We discussed four major things. Number one, behavior as a leading indicator of performance. Number two, the double-edged sword of strengths. Number three, the role of self-awareness and governance. And number four, driving through disruption and change. Hugh Massie is the executive chairman and founder of DNA Behavior International, the behavior and money insights company. As a Titan 100 CEO and widely recognized behavior solutions architect, Hugh Massie addresses every opportunity and challenge from the proven perspective of behavior makes money, which of course it does. This unique analytical approach and AI-driven technologies, and through them, Hugh helps growth-minded leaders create an exponential future by building category king people-centric businesses. That's a mouthful. And in the process, enhance financial decision-making, culture, and performance. Hugh's purpose is to empower people worldwide to optimize the alignment of their natural hardwired talents and financial behaviors to make quantum leaps for creating an exponential future with reduced stress, thereby enabling greater happiness, more success, and improved health for all of us on a much longer basis. Hugh Massie on the Leadovation podcast. Hugh, I'm really just delighted to have you on this show, and I'm really interested into learning your insights regarding behavior as it relates to decisions, as it relates to financial outputs. I know that with most of the organizations that I see, they look at their financial statements first, and then they decide what to do after that. In some ways, it's already too late, right? Because that's a lag indicator. But how can we look at behavior first and then know what sort of financial outcome we might get later? And should we be putting the attention more upstream versus downstream?
So it's great. Firstly, Dean, it's great to be with you, and just sort of to let's go in full on this.
Let's go. Yeah.
What are the slogans that I've lived by? So there's two that I've lived and operated by over the last 24 years since I got into the business of human behavior. And I came from an accounting background. So I think of it that I'm a reformed accountant. I was once a tax specialist and an auditor for 10 years. set up a wealth management business, but I was doing not as much, not just investing, but helping businesses with growth strategies. And then to get greater fulfillment in my life, follow my life purpose of helping people become financially self-empowered, realizing this is about behavior, and behavior is closely related to money. That any decision you make has got a financial consequence to it, or how you think about money drives the decision making. And it doesn't really matter whether that's at an investment level or that's at a business leader level. But I've always operated under one slogan is understanding people before numbers, followed up with behavior drives performance. And I think if you piece those together and respond to what you said, the accounts are going to tell you the past. This is a reflection of past decisions, of what people have done, how they've performed. But behavior is going to potentially tell you what people may do in the future. How are they going to respond to changing circumstances? Product changes, political changes, social changes, whatever. Getting an insight into what might happen 1 week down the track to several years, to some degree, can be predicted by behavior. And that's why it's important to understand the behavior of leaders in a company as to what decisions are they likely to make, what direction are they going to take the company, because that's going to influence the culture. And that all starts with the CEO. And particularly in America, where the CEO and chairman are the same person in most cases, which I actually will just for the record say is not a good thing, but it is. And they've got a very strong influence on the culture. So let's say that the leader, the CEO, has got a propensity to spend a lot of money, but they're also driven towards sales. They're an innovator. They're going to spend a lot of money on innovation. They're going to spend a lot of money on building sales pipelines, which is all good, but that also could have a negative impact on the company. Do you need to do all innovation at high cost? Not particularly in today's world where it's very dynamic. Products aren't going to last as long.
So quick question for you. What you seem to be indicating is that you can almost create preferences or behavioral personas in a leader that then would indicate, to your point, they might be an innovator, for example, versus somebody who may not be an innovator. So for one, there's two-part of the question. One, is that true? And then two, what role does context play? Because the situation that one is dealt with, call it the market, call it competitors, call it a talent issue, is going to obviously influence the behavior of the leader under the auspices of that particular person's style preference relative to how they behave. So in some ways, it's partly like, one, can you measure this stuff regarding these basic kinds of behaviors relative to how we deal with finances? And then what role does context come into play? Meaning, like, chicken or the egg? Are we creating our behavior based on our preferences? Are we creating our behavior based on responding to what we're given?
Right. So, and I think to answer that, the answer is yes to the first one, and to the second one. But let me explain that. So, my business DNA behavior was founded on the basis that people have a natural, instinctive, hardwired behavior that's set from early in life. So that is not all of your personality, but the core of how you operate, at a 85% level, is set by the time you're 3 years old from a natural hardwired behavior point of view. From between conception and 3 years old, there are a whole lot of life events that take place, and circumstances and energies, whatever you want to put, words you want to put on it, that shape who you are. Now, as you go through life, you go to high school or even prep school, or junior school, high school, university, go through the journey of life. You learn how to modify those behaviors for particular situations, and some people that are stubborn won't modify as much. Others that are more flexible will. Some of us have got to bang our head against the wall 20 times on something to adapt. But you have, under pressure, and this is the thing, this is why I got into this business, under pressure you revert to that natural hardwired behavior. It can be predicted and it can be measured, right? And so our business has been about measuring those behaviors, and typically, like any other business that's got a psychometric assessment platform that's scientifically validated, you can have people complete a questionnaire and know that, right? We happen to, the DISC profile, for example, will tell you 4 insights about a person.
Right.
We happen to tell you 64, right? At the core of it, but we've got 4,000 insights overall. So we go deeper on that out of the science. Some people will say, well, that's too much. Well, okay, fine. If you just want to know 4 or 5 insights, we'll tell you 4 or 5 insights. It's whatever you want to know. But what we have done, and I think this is where partly, so those, what we are measuring there, Dean, is the natural hardwired behaviors from someone completing an assessment. And let's say you are a bit more anchored, a bit of a spender, not going to be suited to being in a dynamic environment. It's going to require new products. Can you change or make some different decisions? Yes, you can. You might be a fraction slower to it, but you can do it if you want to. And that also depends on the team around you. But it's being emotionally intelligent enough, if you want to call it that, and aware enough to know, okay, a change is required. Let's introduce a decision-making process, get the best inputs, and go along that way. But what I'm also doing now is, and I think this is, addressing your questions in part, we have learned to build, if you want to call it, a persona of leaders by accessing publicly available data information and sending that into our system to answer the questionnaire that those leaders would ordinarily answer. It produces a digital scan at a pretty high level of accuracy. And now I know I can predict what Elon Musk's going to do. I told some people last year, Tesla is got absolutely, based on the mix of financial behaviors that we had figured out from a study of all of the 500 S&P 500 companies, a strong leadership team for creating growth and innovating. But they've also got the propensity to do this, right? And which is they've got a propensity to destroy their own brand, right? I told some people that last year, and they all sold their stock in December. Because we also could see what was coming, right, from the statements made out there, whatever. I'll make the same statement about Meta, right? That's going to be slightly slower, but because while it's got a good leadership team at one level, when that leadership team shuts down psychological safety in the organization, it'll kill the culture of the business. But to succeed, you've got to have the right mix of financial behaviors, innovation at the top of the company, and then build the right psychological safety platform inside the business. But if you've got the right raw material, you can build the psychological safety if you want to. Meta's just gone and destroyed theirs, right? Like Boeing did many years ago. Now we're looking at what's happened to Boeing, right?
Right.
Sort of struggling along there. They've all, Arthur Andersen, where I worked once upon a time, I said this to my bosses. There's a problem here, and it's, we're growth orientated, but we're not listening to the customers. It's not psychologically safe. We're not investing in training like we once did. Bang, what happens 5 years later? And there's lots of war stories like that. And so you can see from the mix of people, the raw material needed to grow, but also there's then warning signs when they overstep the mark and forget to be relational or build the right relationship-based culture or keep that going, it all falls apart. And so that's the leadership tension as well, sitting in their DNA, is having the balance of results and relationships, which is we're all measuring that through. We're measuring that through the people, and this digital scan process we built enables us to do this mass scale. If you wanted to know tomorrow morning the assessment of the Fortune 500 companies plus others in their sectors, I could tell you that. I can run, because we've been doing that analysis, and that's where we produced a report last year that showed that the companies that perform better over a sustained period of time had the right mix of 6 financial behaviors. And
all right, so what are those? Can you share that without
so
giving away the farm?
One is results drive, right? Which is then you sort of go down to, that is, then there is financial. So there's a results driven financial goal drive, which is really around sales, building sales pipelines. 2 is innovation focus, which is not only innovation, but the risk taking, the preparedness to back the risk, the innovation. And 3 is fiscal control, which is controlling spending, so controlling operating costs and selling costs. And 4 is what we call financial prudence. In other words, the governance structure is there from a thinking perspective to keep the company on track to its goals, to its mission, purpose, operating within a sound framework, because that's a mindset to do that.
What is the difference between that and the fiscal control, though?
Fiscal control is just straight out on spending. The other one is more about strategy, overall direction of the company. I mean, it's somewhat related, right? But you'll see companies, like I looked at a company the other day. It's in the agriculture industry, and everybody in my community is saying, gee, what a wonderful company. It's got $4 billion of revenue, and aren't they doing a great job? And, they get to fly in a private jet. Yeah, great. What's the net profit of that company? $60 million, right? Is that very good? So a $2 million tractor is sold got a net profit of $20,000. What are tariffs going to do to that, right? So in my view, that's not very good, because you can operate $100 million business and make that kind of money, right? Now that's good, right? For far less risk. And so I think this is what this is, and that's why some of the tech companies have done very well. They've got, pools and pools of cash, right? And so that's what we're looking at, and we can then compare the companies in their sectors and tell you, okay, this is the company that's the leader.
You said, though, Hugh, earlier on, you're mentioning Meta around psychological safety and the ability for free speech, etc.
Yeah,
but that doesn't seem to fit into your 4-piece model around.
No. Well, I haven't got to the last one, which is relationship.
Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. So yeah, what's the other one?
The last one is relationship engagement, which is about psychological safety, how you build the employee and client or customer experience, and they're interconnected.
Understood. Okay. So if you went back to Elon, if you wouldn't mind, you said that you had some predictions about how Tesla was going to do. He's obviously become pretty known lately, certainly on the political area, and certainly with his success in his companies. I mean, if you're able to, what's your sense about using him as an example, one that we all can sort of connect to? We all kind of know who Elon Musk is. What's your crystal ball say about him in the future or his companies?
Well, I think the first thing is that putting politics aside, but Musk should have stuck to his knitting of being a great innovator, a person that believes in creating an abundant future, and just absolutely stuck to that. And then just kept on building the right leadership teams that, allow the companies to operate with the right level of psychological safety. But what he's now done is created a lot of brand damage and smell around around the products because people don't like what he's come out and publicly says he stands for, and not only stands for but does. And that's a permanent brand. That's a long-term permanent brand damage that is going to be
But he
hard
is,
to get past.
even though he's coming back to his companies, he's sort of taking a step away from politics. You would
Coming
still
back to
think that
companies is a good thing, right?
yes, yes.
But he's living under the security of the Trump government, still allowing all these government contracts to go past, not prosecuting him on anything. If there's any kind of switch politically in 2 years' time, in midterms, or after this, in the next election cycle, that may all end.
So you mentioned though that in hindsight, for him, it would have been a good idea just to stick to his knitting, as you say. But is there something about the Elon Musk personality type that would indicate, had we gone back in time, to say, this guy is probably going to want to be able to get into politics?
Yeah, it's a fact of loose lips sink ships, and I think that what we see is we measure the influencer style. That's a type of leader. That's a sort of a category of leader.
Yeah,
and they're big in the room people, but they've also got a lot to say, and they can be very heavy-handed. That's a consequence of that style.
But isn't that style also part of what made him successful?
It is, if he had stuck to his knitting, right?
Understood. And so that sounds like it could be an interesting note to leaders listening to this.
Right. I think it's that, the fact is that what I'm talking about is Elon Musk has got a lot of great strengths, and so do other powerful leaders. But your strengths overplayed can be a struggle if not attended to become a weakness. And so, if you're the big in the room leader, the inspirer of people, ideas, products, that's great. That is needed to drive that sales pipeline, right? But there's a day when you can overstep the mark if you don't put boundaries around it, and that's where the struggles emerge. And a struggle is something that is the strength overplayed, but it becomes a real problem when you don't deal with it or attend to it. You're not prepared to listen, have any coaching or guidance, and
right.
The fact is the Tesla board has not been strong enough to, because they're all conflicted, not strong enough to rein him in. And that's a fact. Yep. I mean, you can see it. And I think that's where the governance framework, there is an issue, in the financial prudence. And I think that's where what I'm trying to do is set people up to see the behaviors quickly. And then you can make your decisions around, is the governance strong? What spending controls are there? How are clients or customers thinking about the products? I mean, there's lots of data points on that, and you make your decision.
Is it from a very basic 101 perspective, pay attention to your strengths such that they don't become your weakness? That could be across the board for anybody, whether or not they go through a deep dive analysis.
It's the same for every leader. We've all got to deal with that.
Yep. And I 100% agree with that as well. But I'm also a complete agreement on the fact that we are hardwired at a very early age. You brought in the age of 3. I would have gone to the age of 6 or 7, but you got it even earlier. So hand it to you for that.
By 7, it's about 95% hardwired. At 3, it's 85%. Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
So then I always find this as sort of like, why am I in this little business that we've been doing now for 33 years, right? There's some part of me that believes that there is the ability to change even some of those hardwired perspectives, not to such that they ever go away, but you might be able to control this wild horse a little bit. We might be able to rein it in.
I believe you can with extreme awareness, right?
And is that your key message on that, is around extreme awareness?
Awareness and having coaching, sounding board, wisdom. Yep.
And again, If we just say focus on the leader, the senior leader of an organization, what's your experience on that? Do they have that by and large? Is part of the, it kind of goes back to that chicken and the egg thing. Like part of the thing that made Elon so successful is partly what you're seeing as being his downfall right now. I
Yep.
mean, whether or not he recovers is soon to be seen, but is part of the DNA, using the word that you use in your business with respect to a powerful leader, you say, yes, they need to have an extreme amount of self-awareness and coaching and mentoring in order to make adjustments. But it's part of the reason why they're so successful is because they don't have that kind of extreme self-awareness. Is it part of the the thing that you come with that makes it more difficult?
Yeah, I think what you've delved into there and pointing to, Dean, is a really interesting thing. I think at the end of the day is that if the leader is going to have, we're all unique as human beings. I think you've got to believe in that. And you've got to take, for some of these leaders, they've got extraordinary strengths. They're out on the edge, just like some sports people are. And what they need is to allow those strengths to flourish, right? And so you've got to work with that person, but they also it needs to be pointed out to them. Here's where you can fall off the perch and let them make the decision. And the people that hang in there and perform on a sustainable basis for a long time minimize the consequences of those mistakes. Like no one is not going to make some mistakes, you and I included, right? It's knowing when, okay, this is the moment to pull back on this, right? So there's nothing saying that Musk shouldn't continue to be that extraordinary talent out there, but maybe it is that there's a point, even though he's the world's richest man or thereabouts, financially, where's the wisdom check, right?
Yeah, right. Wisdom. Yeah. I also want to go to the other side of the human ledger, which is the follower. You mentioned the board of Tesla, maybe not being strong enough to rein in Elon, right? One could say the same thing within an organization with a strong leader, be it female or male, whomever it might be, that we are enamored by this person because they have such strong conviction of purpose and they have a big personality and they get results and so forth, that the other part of the drama, if you will, in this play we're talking about is not just the leader, but the people with whom they lead, and what sort of voice do they allow themselves, what sort of wisdom and self-determination and all sorts of other things that I'm sure get put into it as the most important context that makes this leader successful or not. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that they've all got a role, and in a way, they're an enabler,
right,
to someone like Musk. And what are their incentives to be an enabler? And there's a point where we talk about in strict corporate governance, which I believe is stronger in other countries. What is an independent director? And a board should have a majority independent, of that size company, majority of independent directors. They are not making $500 million from stock performance, right? In a short period of time. They might, but if they've got that sort of money from being a founder, but they're not an independent director. And I think this gets down to governance structure, right? Partly, but also then is having mechanisms within the company around decision making to address the decisions in the right way. And that comes down to processes. There are known processes to how a proposal gets voted on that would mitigate, if you want to call it, the noise in the room from somebody stronger, right?
Right.
What discipline are you prepared to have to ensure everybody doesn't just follow the King Kong leader? And if he's then or she's then making threats behind the scenes, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to get rid of you type stuff, or you're not going to get X options and all that sort of stuff. What do you got? Bullying, haven't you? Right.
Right.
Don't tell me that's not going on. Right.
Right.
But do you
Well,
need that to flourish? I don't believe so.
yeah.
Right.
You mentioned, you point your ship, if you will, towards finance, and the decisions that we make regarding money. And certainly that's a ubiquitous thing that we all share. I get it. But we also have other things that motivate us, that don't necessarily have to do with dollars and cents. Um, what about the ROI of just hugging your mom, right? That's what I think the great quote from
Wow.
Tony Hsieh said. It's something that you hear about, just the altruistic desire to do something, whether or not it has a financial outcome.
Yeah, I think let's get to that. I think
Yeah.
the thing that one of the points I'm making, I just want to sort of cover off, is that money is intertwined in everything, and the energy of it, it's always there, and therefore that's why I address it to talk about leadership decisions and what's good leadership decisions, character, courage to do the right thing, without addressing money, or even having compassion as a leader without addressing money or the financial consequence of it, would be leaving a major thing behind. But when I address life, and I've done it, this is on other podcasts, and okay, what does success mean for a leader, an entrepreneurial leader like myself, or like you, Dean, or any company leader, including Elon Musk? I would say that if you define your success by how much money you made, or the amount of the revenues, then you're setting yourself up for failure, right? Is Elon, just measuring Musk's success by the size of the companies is only part of it. He's had, regardless of what we said today, he's had enormous positive impact, right? But I think this is the thing, is for all leaders out there, that there's always someone who's got a higher revenue than you, or a net profit, or driving a better car, or whatever, got a better house, living in the right neighborhood, but you don't know their life circumstances. You don't know how that came about, and you don't know what's on the horizon for them. It could be health, right? Is a problem. So to me, measuring success comes down to the human impact you have and putting a number on that. And hopefully you've got the right financial model behind it. And if you have a lot of human impact, you're going to have a lot of legacy. And probably if you've done that well, you're going to make a reasonable amount of money. Maybe you won't make as much as Musk, but maybe you're a better person, right? A better human, that people will remember you well by. And I think that starts to become the judgment. What's the point of being a hedge fund manager and I've made $100 million and I'm sitting there, life's miserable, and I don't know what to do next? And I'm in
Yeah.
prison,
So that,
getting
yeah,
divorced. I've
exactly.
got kids that, I can't relate to. That's a problem, isn't it?
Right. Right. So the other insight that I hear you say, in addition to really being aware of your strengths, these hardwired capabilities, such that you have enough self-awareness to know when they become your weakness. I think that's a great point that you've made and reminded people of. But also about orienting yourself as to what do you define as success? Because to your point, money is just a tool to something else.
Yeah.
It's an enabler to an experience, to a behavior, to something that you want to achieve or you want to experience with other people. So I think that's a great point. Are there other types of key insights that, Hugh, I guess you're thinking about now? Because we've got a lot going on right now. There's a fairly tumultuous sea of changes happening. And when we record this is the 27th of May, 2025. And, I don't know if we've ever had this amount of political change happening. And now we've got AI screaming in at a remarkable speed, talk in predictions about how it's going to affect the labor market. And, I personally probably use ChatGPT alone once a day at least, if not more, just to help make me more productive. These are external types of activities that are happening. How is that going to affect the behaviors of the leaders that you see? And, or more importantly, what should they be doubling down on during times of great turmoil and great disruption?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I think that at the end of the day, you can't control the economic and political environment. Maybe if you're Elon Musk, you can, but
Right.
generally, most of us, and including powerful leaders there on the Fortune 500, S&P, whatever you can't control the economic environment, but like everything in life, you can control your response to it and to the circumstances, whatever gets thrown up. We can all sit there and debate whether tariffs are a good thing or a bad thing. That's not the purpose of today.
Right.
The fact is they're looming over everybody's heads. But the one thing that's going on is the rate of technological change is enormous and impacting almost every area of businesses and our lives, like you just mentioned, Dean. And therefore, I think for leaders, there is a necessity there to embrace it. It's going to happen, whether it's productivity change. But I think the bigger thing leaders have got to address is you can only make so many productivity changes. You're going to have to make product changes. How do you transform your business at the product level? Like we've done it at DNA Behavior. We've gone from the traditional full scan psychometric assessment process to also having a digital scan process. That's now opens up a whole lot of new product lines and service lines that never existed before, right? So let's say that you're Intel or a company like that, NVIDIA. How do you do the same thing? You've been in X business producing semiconductors and chips and whatnot. Or maybe there's going to be a world where that's out the window and you've got to have something else.
Right.
And so therefore the leaders are going to have to embrace their response to the economic environment is you've got to deal with the technological disruption. That's going to be your solution out of whatever comes your way.
And are there certain types of leadership personas or types that will succeed or navigate through this easier? And what does that look like if somebody were listening to this and go, "Oh, that's me," or "Oh, that's not me"?
Well,
What sort of advice do you have for those who are thrown into this kind of chaos relatively easily? And what sort of advice might you have for those that really struggle with this level of change?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things to sort of precursor my remarks. One of the things that's interesting is I follow a lot of sort of strategy papers that Price Waterhouse does, PwC, puts out Strategy Insider twice a week. And I followed this for a few years, and one of their major research studies that they published at the beginning of last year, 2024, and then they did it again this year in around the Davos conference. Is there's an expectation towards leaders of major companies. 42% of them are saying we think there's a high chance our business won't be in existence by 2030.
Wow.
Okay, so let's say, I don't know obviously which companies leaders exactly said that. There'll be public and private in there. But if we knew the leadership style of the top leaders in those companies, I could pretty quickly see which ones are going to create new products, new markets, deal with the change pretty well, which ones are going to get stuck. But I think even with the leaders that might be more what I call anchored to the existing way because the company's still spitting out pretty good profits, doing okay, why change something that's not broken? My thing would be is you've got to look down inside your company and find, and it could be younger people, where the innovators are and start to groom them up, bring them up to be able to think strategically, design the right products with the right mentorship and leadership. It's not just asking a 23-year-old to come up with a new idea. It's innovation's a process. But I think these companies have got to dig deep, and they might find within their ranks there are some people that could become the chief of AI. The head of data becomes a different type of person. Product design becomes different. God forbid, behavioral sciences might become a division of some of these businesses. And I think that's where the companies that are thinking forward are going to go. It doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money to do that.
Yeah.
You don't need to spend $500 million to do that. And I think that's what these companies need to be thinking about doing. So we can identify who's more likely to do that and who's not. But even if you took the top leaders and then said to them, okay, you guys aren't orientated this way, but here's some changes you've got to make. But inside your teams might be the people that are going to help you navigate this.
It's got to be tough, though. I know that these organizations sometimes they're things are tight. They're maybe even laying off people. They're still getting revenue for whatever they do, the service or product that they provide. But geez, they're thinking, Hugh, man, you're right, but we just don't have the flipping time to invest in what could be when we're trying to survive what is.
Well, some of them have already, some of them, I suppose you can get to companies like Kodak when everybody talks about that case study, but they actually did the work many years ahead of time about going digital, but at the end of the day, they decided not to do it. They could have done it.
Right. And well, there's the Blockbuster example too. Yeah.
Yeah. There are some of these companies that, they are going to get stuck. They're on such a thin margin. They don't know what to cut, or it's so intertwined. If you cut out one division, will you screw up the 9 others, whatever it is. But there's some there in the middle, I would say, that have been thinking of the ideas or got a solution. They're going to have to back it, right?
Yeah.
And that's that's part of the journey of this. We all get to a fork in the road where we've got to make a decision. It's sort of like saying you're going to have surgery. Do you go down surgery, or do you take some tablets, or do you just go and sit in the corner and meditate and hope, right? And that's not knocking meditation, because I believe in it, but
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and hopefully you even know that you're at a fork in a road.
Yeah.
You might just not even see that. We could be so blind to the, immediate concerns of the day.
The best time to do it is when you're already fully profitable, right? And
yes,
operating well.
No question about it. So I want to ask you one last question here. We've sort of said that, yes, it's possible to change. We are hardwired by the time we're 3 or 7. A lot of self-awareness is going to be incumbent on the leader to do that kind of change. A lot of support, psychological safety, the mentoring and coaching that they might get. As I get even deeper into this, as I think about what you are so good at, you're getting into these very microscopic types of behaviors and where they came from and what kind of results they have financially. Do you get into the detail about what motivates the behavior change? What's the incentive, or what's the, oh my gosh, what's the motivation that gets people to change? Because that, in the end, is the nexus point as to whether or not somebody does, is if we got to get to that kernel. Have you been able to kind of unpack some of that?
That becomes a different discussion, because we're now talking change management.
Yes.
But we do address that as well. So there is a change management part, which is going to come down to understanding motivations, which you talked about before, Dean. Not all of it's money. Part of it is. Right. But it will be, that might be the only thing for some people, but there's also other factors that are going to motivate people that are important to understand. It's the environment in which you're going to bring the change in, how quickly the environment, the leadership, respect. There's a number of forces at work there.
Yep.
But yeah, we do address those things. And communication is a big part of that.
Yep. Well, I think that's part of the one of the holy grails, I think, in our industries, yours as well as mine, is I think this is my closing salvo on this one, is I think we give people a lot of information, which is really important. And we are in a world where finding and getting information is not hard to get. You just ask ChatGPT on your phone and you're going to get it, right? The question is what's going to motivate you to take the information and do something with it. And that's where I wonder about that, so that's maybe we'll do another show just on that and dig into that one a little bit more.
Yeah.
Hugh, how can people, go ahead. Sorry.
That's worth a conversation.
It totally is. It's what kind of makes me, scratch my head and noodle a bit, but you've got some amazing insights here. I want to ask if you could maybe just share with people how they can follow you, what's coming up for you in the future, you personally and your company, but more importantly, you've got some great information, great content that I know that people would like to know more about. How do they get it?
So the first way to, learn more about DNA behavior and me, there's plenty of resources on our website, at dnabehavior.com, and we have a page called dnabehavior.com/start, which will sort of give you a guided tour of how to start working with some of this and understanding what's behind it. And of course, there's plenty of Hugh Massie all over that. My LinkedIn account is pretty busy if anyone wants to go there. So I'm Hugh Massie in Atlanta. Look it up. It's pretty well the only one. So other than my son, who's 12 years old. So I think they're the first couple of places. I think where are we going? Much harder on the digital scan, looking at how companies are rated based on behavior. So, Morningstar does a good job based on financial accounting, lagging information. How do we get leading indicators from behavior? I think that's a big part. That's a big part of the future. And the other area really is tied into this is the whole field of behavioral economics. And we've got there's a big following there in behavioral economics, and I think is now harnessing that. It's going to be my next big initiative.
Yeah, and then we could do another show just talking about what behaviors are we no longer needing to do because AI is going to do it for us.
Well, AI is embedded with behavior.
Yeah,
and
to your point.
And so that's another whole issue that people have got to be awake to, and businesses got to be awake to, is what's the behavior of AI, right?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, we'll do another interview on that one.
Yeah, very interesting conversation, because we've been starting to address that.
It's great. Well, Hugh, thank you so much for your time. This is fascinating. It's a great way to start the day, and I look forward to learning more about what you guys are all about.
Perfect, Dean. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.